All right. Hello, hello, hello. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am really excited about today's panel discussion. We've got a full panel, actually. We have, I think, more than we've had on any of the other ones. What do we got? We have four. Okay. So, same as the first one. So, we have four panelists today, which I'm really excited about. We're going to be talking about the presentation stage. And I think this discussion is maybe not as sexy as the ones about the prospecting and overcoming the objections and closing the sale, but I actually think this is the one that's probably the most important. Meaning, I think the tips that you're going to hear today are probably going to have a bigger impact than any of the other sessions. The reason I say that is prospecting. I mean, you heard a lot of practical tips, but at the end of the day, it's like go do it. Like you got to go prospecting. I mean, there's I don't know what to tell you. Like you just got to go do it. And if you go out and prospect, you're probably going to catch your stride after a week or two, and you're going to be fine, and you're going to do well. When it comes to overcoming objections, well, you need to learn to avoid the objections in the first place, and you're going to hear the same objections over and over and over again. So hopefully you got some good tips last time. When it comes to closing the sale, the key is you got to close the sale. You have to ask for the business, right? And so, the ABCs, always be closing, and all of that. And so we're going to talk about some really cool skills next week, and I'm sure we'll hear some good stuff from our panel. But like I say, at the end of the day, you just got to close the sale. Where most of the variation is in terms of so how do we actually build towards getting the sale? That comes in the presentation stage. That's where there's kind of this difference of what you're going to be able to do is that in that presentation stage. Okay, let's dive in here. I'm going to introduce our panel here in just a second. Let me get everybody ready here. Okay, good. All right, so panel, go ahead and turn on your mic, turn on your camera there. Awesome. Okay, so beautiful. So we don't have anybody new on our panel today, which is great. So we don't have to spend any time kind of going through introducing. I think everybody knows everybody here. But I'm really excited because I think this is a really good group, meaning you guys all do things differently as it relates to the people you're going after and all of that. So here's what I want to do. We're going to start with Tam because on my screen, you're the one in the upper left here. And Tam, what we'd love to hear from you is give us the 60-second or the elevator pitch of, and you may have different value propositions, but what are the core value propositions? Why do merchants go with you? What is it that grabs their attention about your offer? Then explain, if you would, how do you take another few minutes to tell us how do you transition out of this kind of prospecting and just generating curiosity? How do you transition from that into presenting this value? And then maybe any tips you have about how you do the presentation. Is it your iPad? Or, do you have a PowerPoint presentation? Are you just talking to them? Like, how are you doing this stage where you're presenting value and hopefully building towards the close?
So the real quick, the value proposition. So it's three factors we like to hit, and I'll kind of go over it. Is obviously saving money is one, tech is two, white glove service is three. So the way we say it is, saving money, even though important, is only one of our value propositions. We also want to ensure you have the proper technology in order to run your business as efficiently as possible. And that can go for obviously either B2B or POS. It's kind of the same thing, right? And all this is, we like to do, Mr. Robinson, Mrs. Merchant, with a white glove customer service approach. So we don't sell and forget about you. We continue to service you throughout the life of the account with us. So those are the three menu value propositions we like to do, regardless of the type of business we're going after, because everybody goes and says we can save you money. So if you just sell on that, it'll be very tough. You need to also connect them with values that will change the way they're currently taking transactions to help them either do things more smoothly or do things faster. We can actually save money on staff, things that are done by the POS or software that now the staff has to do manually, all this stuff, right? And then real quick, not take a lot of time to go into the transition, right? So you're talking about the transition, right, James? As far as going to the sale from
Well,
the
yeah,
pitch.
going from kind of the initial phase of you're just trying to get your foot in the door, generate that conversation, maybe even small talk, right? A little bit about the business, but at some point you're like, okay,
Okay, I
like I
got you.
should tell
Okay.
you what I do,
So,
right? Yeah.
so we build rapport, which is the part you're saying, and everybody has their own unique personality to build rapport. Whatever works for you, great. From the rapport, you eventually have to get to the point. So we usually transition slowly into after we build the rapport and get to know them and the business, how long they've been around, all this stuff. Into tell me a little bit about your current system, your current software, your current POS. What are some things you like about them? What are some things that you like it to be different? And we want to hear both. And then I kind of just sit there and listen and I just hear them out. And this is where I'm kind of taking my closing data nitbits in order to use that in the transition to close. So you might be saying, we love our POS because our online, for example, our online sales integrates and it prints out the receipt. Great. What we don't like is our current system, the handheld one doesn't have the menu. So our servers have to always go and write it down and bring it back, and that's taking time away from. Got it. And then I just keep listening, and then from that point, after they're done talking, I do a little bit about the field. I go into my field felt found approach, and that's how I transition into the next phase. So merchant, I thank you for sharing. I'm great. Your POS can do this and that. I also know how you feel about the portion that he didn't like, right? About this and that. We found many merchants that have felt the same way about these things. But what we found is with certain technologies that we offer, it allows them to make these other features that you're talking about, you're having challenges a lot smoother in order to save them time, money, and hassle with their staff. And that's kind of the transition that we take. So I don't know if that's what
I love
you
it.
were leaning towards.
No, that's really good. Just out of curiosity, to get really specific, I'm really curious of this. Like what you just described was, I think, beautiful for like the POS side. What about B2B, where maybe there's not quite as much of a focus on the tech? Like, how is that different? Maybe.
Believe it or not, B2B, um, there is still a lot of tech issues. Well, I don't know where you guys are selling. I'm in Southern California, Los Angeles area, super saturated, good stuff. But here, there's a lot of people still using like the giant old technology of the Verifone terminal, and then they're either keying it in on the Verifone terminal, or
Really?
or they have some random authorized.net, which is not talking to the terminal.
Right.
And I mean, we go in and we streamline the whole thing. We have terminals that talk to the virtual terminal, and then obviously we talked about interchange optimization for B2Bs, and we say, I don't know if you're aware, but these corporate cards you're taking, they're not cheap, even from the card branch side for the wholesale interchange fees. But our gateway already has filters that allow us to optimize the interchange, the cost of these fees. So believe it or not, we can save you money, not just on the discount rate, but on wholesale fees you're currently paying to card brands. And that kind of opens their eyes a little bit on the savings side. But the tech side also, are they doing ACH? Are they doing where do they have the option to send a link to their customer
Okay.
to kind of alleviate a little bit of the risk of the
Yeah.
chargeback, what have you? So there's still a lot of small integrations. Does their system integrate with QuickBooks and update the sales, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Love it.
So there's still a
Love it.
lot with B2B.
Cool. Love it. Really good stuff. Let's see, Jeremy, let's go to you. So give us same deal. What's the value you're providing? I mean, obviously there's going to be overlap as we move through here, but what's some of the unique value things that you're providing, and give us some tips about the presentation of that value.
Yeah, I mean, initially when going, before kind of cash discount and dual pricing, our initial goal was to get the statement, right? That was kind of our first goal to go in there. So going into a business, talking to them, our main value propositions, hey, we'll guarantee to reduce your cost. No question about that. So reduction in cost, we're going to provide you great local support. When you think about pain points that a business has when it comes to processing, support is one of them. If they don't have a local representation, that's a big problem in a lot of situations for them. Trying to call First Data, I mean, as an ISO trying to call First Data, it's a nightmare. Think about the merchants trying to call them to get support. So local support, we educate them on how pricing really works in the industry and what other companies do to take advantage of them from a pricing standpoint. Once or twice per year, they're increasing rates, they're increasing their margin on their rates. So we offer them rate locks. So we educate them on, hey, our goal is to, excuse me, I told you I had just kind of getting over coronavirus of my throat and stuff.
Appreciate you being on today. So, yeah.
Our goal is we express to them is, look, my goal is for you to make a switch, and this will be the last switch you ever have to make. Because one, we're going to give you extremely competitive pricing, extremely low rates. We're going to provide you better technology than you have today. We offer free equipment. So whether it's just a terminal or a POS, we offer free POS placement as well. So another value prop that we're trying to bring to the table that they may not have today. Again, that local support. Obviously, next day funding still today. Some businesses don't have next day funding. We just converted one a few weeks ago. A pretty large fish gallery didn't have next day funding. Still 2-day funding. So that was another value add that we brought to the table as they switched over to us. Contracts, that's a huge thing, right? Is we're not going to lock you in a contract. We're here to earn your business. We're going to earn your loyalty by providing you great support, great service, great payment technology, and we're going to earn your loyalty and earn our goal is to have you for the life of your business. And so we don't need to lock you in a contract. We feel that our service is going to kind of earn your loyalty, and you're going to stay with us for a long time. So
just out
again,
of curiosity, sorry to cut you off, but just out of curiosity, with that pitch, correct me if I'm wrong here, I have a suspicion that a big part of that presentation is you. In other words, you're not necessarily selling super flashy tech. I mean, I know you probably are a lot of times, but in what we're talking about here, this is more of a processing pitch. I mean, you're talking about saving the money, next day funding, no contract, good local service. I mean, that's like you, right? So I'm just kind of curious, as you go through the presentation stage, I'm sure you're aware of that dynamic. Like, are you doing things, maybe even before or during or after to like make to emphasize the fact that like they're going with you, like they're trusting you with their business? It just seems like it's a very kind of centered pitch around like your personal brand or company brand. Like, talk about that if you would a little bit.
Well, I've been this for 18 years, so know what the competition does. So I have, these are the things that we do different than most businesses out there, most ISOs out there, right, today. So with all the consolidation, especially today as well, it's getting worse and worse for businesses. And we're finding merchants with 4.5% effective rates, 5% effective rates. It's just crazy what these large ISOs are doing to, raising their rates. So we sell technology. Obviously, we're going to sell our gateway. We're going to sell omni-channel solution. But the initial, doing both. I heard a statistic about 2 years ago, 70% of merchants who make a conversion today are still making a conversion over pricing. So that's still the main reason why business is making a switch from one processor to another. So again, that's a conventional pitch. With cash discount, we're talking about eliminating their processing fees altogether.
Right.
That's
right.
part of the presentation, part of the pitch too. So today now with that, we're coming in there with that, leading with that, and say, look, we got, from a pricing perspective, we got 2 programs for you that that one can eliminate your processing altogether and maximize your savings. If you don't want to convert to that, you want to stay with the conventional processing where you're still incurring the fees, we still guarantee to reduce your costs, and we can take a look at that for you as well. And then we go into looking at what they have, what are they using today? Do they just have a terminal? If you talked about B2B, we focus a lot on B2B merchants. Been doing that for years because of the level 2, level 3, and just the advantage we have there from a pricing perspective. A lot of these guys are still using in the B2B environment. They're still using writing down their customers' information on a piece of paper. It's locked in a cabinet, and they have recurring customers. They got to go look it up. And so we talked about the gateway, the omni-channel aspect of the gateway. We're going to help you be more efficient in accepting payments from your customers. And so we'll go through those value adds as well. But I would say still the pricing reduction cost and how we're going to handle your pricing for the life of your account is one of our main still value props that you're going to get when you convert to us from another competitor.
Yeah.
And so again, when it comes to the technology, we'll get into that, but that's going to come with when we go in there, find out what are they using today, what do they have, what do they not have, what can we bring to the table that they don't have that's going to bring more value to them. Again, our goal is when we go into that door, when I go into the door, or I teach my sales guys to go in the door, is we want to bring more value to them than they're currently getting. So what is that? Maybe it's a POS system, a free POS, and we match their rates. Maybe it's the cash discount and plus, POS, and so they have a terminal and nothing today, right? So it just all depends on that business, what they have, and what can we do, bring to the table that's going to provide them more value. And how, so the two main goals is help a business increase profitability and help them be more efficient in managing and accepting their payments. And when it comes to POS software, which we do free POS software as well, you know, helping you now manage your whole entire operation as well, more efficiently.
Yeah, I like that. I think one of the things I think is interesting too is you know, you absolutely can still sell on the concept of savings. To your point, I mean, a lot of people are still, you know, the reality in the field is that, as you said, most businesses, smaller businesses, especially physical location, they really are geared towards price. That's the conversation they expect to have. And I mean, I've never really been, you know, I was just at the WSAA, and it was like, if I could take one theme away from the WSAA, it was don't sell on price. And frankly, I always get a little offended because I'm always kind of like, that's nice. And I know you sold a merchant account 15 years ago, so thank you for sharing that with us. But like, I was just out in the field a month ago. Guess what everybody wants to talk about?
Right.
Price. So yeah, sure, you can move the conversation towards value, but a lot of merchants want to talk about savings. Like, that's the way it is. So my issue with it is not, you know, this like moral, like, oh, don't sell on price, that's a terrible idea. My thing is, the problem with selling on price is that margins have compressed. So there's not as much value to add there. I mean, the thing I love about selling on price is that the value is, you know, objective. It's not, it's, there's no subjectivity. It's like, I'm going to save you $4,000 a year. Like, I know what that's worth. It's worth $4,000 a year. Like, you know what I mean? Whereas you say, I'm going to improve your efficiencies. Well, now you got to get into the weeds a little bit. And I like having those conversations, but I think what's cool about it is you can still sell on what I like is, I don't like selling on price. I like selling on the concept of reducing your cost. Like, I'm the person that's going to make sure your costs stay low. Like you talked about, Jeremy, the locking, you know, rate locks and stuff. I like that kind of thing. I also tell people twice a year, we do a rate analysis for you, and we come back and show you where you're at. And if the processor, because we're a broker, so we do different processors, if they raise your rate, like, we're going to take it back down again. Like, you know, this is what we do every 6 months. So it's more like, you know, I don't, if somebody else comes in and says, well, I'll give you a lower rate, that's not going to tempt them as much, because it's like, we're not just, it's not just about the rate. It's like, we make sure you have low cost, and we're going to consistently communicate with you, you know, in regards to that. So, Adam, let's go to you. I'm kind of curious to hear what you have to say about this topic, because I know your prospecting methodology and all of that is a little bit different. So talk to us about when does the value proposition come into play? What are you selling on value? And give us a little more context there.
So I think, like, the theme of this panel discussion is, like, why do business owners switch processors, and particularly why do they switch to you? So local is best. You know, I'm big on social media. We've got plenty of card not present merchants and card present merchants that are not local to Cleveland. That's where we are. But I think we should think about these three concepts, and we Tam and Jeremy kind of hit on already. 3 reasons why merchants switch processors to an ISO is technology, pricing. So, like, if it's Interchange Plus, is it transparent? Does that company have a good reputation? Do they do rate increases, that kind of stuff? Or if it's dual pricing, are you helping that merchant with the compliance aspect, doing it correctly, making sure that the receipts are correct, the signage, the equipment, all that stuff? That's number 2. And number 3 is local service. So we're all kind of selling the same thing. That's on the ISO level, what that looks like. Now, why do merchants switch to agents particularly? And it's 3 words: trusted expert service. The other stuff doesn't matter. Like, I've had plenty of calls, one call closes, not, you know, not big deals or complicated ones, where you walk in and, like, the appointment is already set. I've had 2 times in my career where I've walked into a business to prospect it, and I walked out with a signature. Both times because they couldn't process, and I'm like, dude, I got a 220 CL in my trunk. Like, I can get you going. That was back in the Heartland days. We had instant approval stuff. So, but if a business owner is going to give you their time, they are doing that for a reason. And, like, yeah, they might want to save money and stuff like that, but let's put that aside. I've said that so many times to merchants. Like, I know you want to save money, and I can give it to you for free. So let's just think about that. But I want to put that aside right now. I'm going to ask you 26 questions that are somewhat relevant to your business. And it's all circumstantially based, right? We have all that stuff, you know, written out and with explanations behind it. But, like, somebody might switch just because they want next day funding, like Jeremy said. Like, or they're using a VX520 to do card not present payments B2B. Like, that's just like, I heard you say that, I think I salivated a little bit like hearing that, because that's just like, dude, what? Like, people actually do that. Then they take the receipt and then they scan it and email it, like whatever. But I think those three reasons, it's different from a macro level with the ISO. And that's why like these big ISOs are building out their technology, because that's what attracts the volume. Because an agent knows that if they place great technology, they're going to service it. It's their residuals. And if they give something that's transparent with pricing, and or it's dual pricing, whatever it might be, like that's the recipe right there to have a client for 10 years, right? So I think that like there's really no like main value prop. I mean, one of our agents just signed a guy that he just wanted a better sign at the door. He had a non-compliant sign, and like the agent's like, okay, I got you, and signed the deal. Like same type of thing. It was a terminal install, like cash or dual pricing, easy, whatever. So it's always subjective. Like value's in the eye of the buyer. I think a lot of us get so entangled in like the nuts and bolts of what we offer. 9 times out of 10, the merchant just wants a trusted expert that gives good service, right? They don't care about the ins and outs. Like that's just too complicated. They're trying to run their mechanic shop, and they just want somebody they can trust, somebody that's local, and somebody that knows what they're doing. So that's that. As far as transitioning to the close, I used to think this was like instinctual, like you had to be like that killer instinct. I think you can develop it. Some people are born with it. They just know how to close. They know how to sell. If you believe in what you sell enough, it's easy, right? And you know how to create value and build it over throughout the conversation. But I think we should go back to the beginning. A lot of it's how did the sales process start? Was it a referral? Did you cold call it? How did it come in? And like, we're big on like, yo, don't go in there and try to sell. Go in there and say something like, hey, I noticed that your VX520 is like very outdated. Like we offer a free point of sale system for select merchants. You probably qualify. Can I come back tomorrow and tell you a little bit about it? I just need 5 minutes of your time. What's better for you, 10 o'clock or 2 o'clock? And that's enough for them to say, yeah, you know what, cool. Leave them your card, set the meeting, get out. Stop talking to them, dude. There's no reason to talk to them right there. They're not in the buying mode. Like, but they will wake up tomorrow and they'll be like, oh yeah, that dude's coming in with a credit card. Okay, cool. Come in on time, ask the right questions, geared around the reason why you set the appointment, not just like, don't talk about savings if the guy wants a technology upgrade. You're shooting yourself in the foot, you know? Give the value where the value is due and stay away from savings as much as possible, because yes, they want to save money. The right merchants though, the best ones are the ones that are like, you know, I want technology so that I can have less headaches, more efficiency in my business, less overhead, and I want to scale, right? Versus somebody that does $1 million a year in sales. That's a great business, but like, you can't save your way to wealth. You can, that's a separate conversation, but why not grow to 10 million? That's way better. So we want merchants that are talking about growth, not just like conserving. That's a scarcity mindset, and usually those merchants suck. So it's all about building the value with what the merchant wants. If they want a cost savings, okay, cool, I get it. Put it aside. I'm gonna find a reason why you're gonna buy from me outside of cost. And they're like, oh, cool, this guy's different, or this girl's different. Sweet.
Yeah. One thing I like about that is I think in the presentation stage, I think emphasis is like super important, right? Like, you know, we're going to save them money and we talk about that, but I think the key is figure out what they want you to emphasize.
Yep.
And then emphasize that and figure out, and also you got to kind of figure out sometimes you just don't want to go down a certain path that the merchant wants you to go down.
No.
And I think really good salespeople are so great at kind of like dealing with that. But like you just said, in your case, in this particular scenario, hey, I didn't want to talk about cost in this one. So you just kind of like, I know I'm going to save you money, but everybody says that. Now let me ask you a couple of questions real quick.
Yes.
And right. And you kind of, you know, like one of my favorite words in sales is anyway. I used to say that all the time. So you know, they'd be like, you know, now let me ask you this question, you know, about my statement. And I'd say, that is such a great question. I'm definitely going to cover that in a few minutes. Anyway, and I just go right back to what I wanted to talk about.
I love that, because you're in control. You guide the conversation, right? Another thing to think about, speaking of that, so we call it setting the tone. So when you go meet with a merchant, like you set the appointment, come back, or it's on Zoom or whatever, there's going to be like that 2 to 3 minute like rapport building, and what that is that's the chance to show that you're trusted, like you're a genuine human being, that you care about them. You're not there just to get a paycheck. Like obviously we're all in this business to make money, but like you're selling to a small business owner. 9 times out of 10, it's like a mom and pop shop that they basically are a consumer. It's not really B2B. Yeah, I mean, it is business to business, but
Right.
they run the business. They wear 50 different hats.
You're selling a person, you're not selling a business.
Yeah, like if it's a 20 location restaurant group with a CFO and a controller, that's different than closing a yarn shop that does 20K a month. That's a lot different. So we call it setting the tone. So you come in, maybe they get you something to drink. Always accept something to drink if they give it to you. Like if they're offering it to you, say yes, because that's a micro commitment from them into the relationship, right? Ask to use the bathroom, get up, check it out, like know what you're doing. But here's an interesting thought. So you mentioned that a lot of salespeople in our industry, we're all very likable, typically, most of us, except for a few, right? There's reasons to how do I say this the right way? There's a difference between being likable and being a closer, right? So when you go in and you're meeting with a merchant, set the tone, build a rapport, have that fun time, and then what we do is we say, okay, cool. So I'm here today. I'm going to ask you some questions about your business. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about who we are, what we do. I'm going to propose a couple ideas as far as technology goes. We're going to talk about pricing. Have you ever heard of interchange? And they'll say, no, what's that? Well, all right, I'll give you a quick credit card 101 if you want, or I can just keep it in layman's terms. It's up to you. And then if you decide that you want to be a client, it takes like 10 minutes for us to collect information, get an application signed. We get you approved and up and running in usually like a day or two. How's that sound? And they say yes. Okay, cool. They've agreed to that tone, and then you go into it. You command the conversation. You let them know that you know what you're doing. You're there to build rapport and help them, but you're also there to do business. So you're putting that intention behind it. It's not just like, hey, I'm here to talk and I'm in the friend zone. It's like, no, dude, I'm here to do business. Let's go.
Yeah.
You know?
I like one of my first sales managers, and then we'll transition over here to Jeron. But one of my first sales managers said to me, he's like, James, you are very likable. He's like, but remember, it's not enough to be liked. You have to be respected.
Yes.
And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, okay. And I was like, that was a moment for me in sales. I was probably like 19. And that kind of like shifted my mindset a little bit to like, oh, okay, wait a minute. Like, yeah, everybody likes me that I'm talking to, but I got to get them to respect me. So then that kind of changes the direction. Yeah, right. So Jeron, let's go to you. I know, again, it's so great because everybody has such a kind of different ways they're doing things. So Jeron, share with us your value proposition and how you go about the presentation stage.
Okay, yeah. So as many people know, we primarily focus on large ticket card not present, specifically like home improvement contractors, home services companies. We were actually just at a conference Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the 2022 Growth Mastery Summit, which is put on by Dave Yoho Associates, and there were 200 plus remodeling companies there with an average revenue of like $8 million, and they were all at that stage where they were looking to get to the next level. And so the value proposition to that merchant is efficiency, right? It's not, I mean, price, again, when you guys are talking about, are you selling on price and things like that, I've always, it really depends on how you got in front of that merchant. If it's a cold call, you typically have to lead with price at some degree to even have their attention. But with us, like when most of our business is referrals, or like if we're a sponsor at an event that these people paid several $1,000s to be at, then it's a completely different conversation, right? So for us, my value proposition is being an expert. And when it comes to the home improvement contractor, I always lead with the fact that I was in the house selling home improvements for 5 years. So immediately they know that I know what their life and their job is like, right? So the things that I touch on, I ask a lot of questions, right? We touch on chargeback assistance. When I talk to them about how we handle the chargebacks and how at no additional cost, I will review your contracts, your service agreements, to make sure that the verbiage in your service agreements gives you the authorization to debit that card when the project is finished, because you went to your lawyer to get this contract written, right? So he's going to make sure that you have a legal right to those funds and that you're covered on that side. That is not the same thing as you having authorization to pull funds from a card that they gave you for the deposit if they're not answering your calls after the job is done. And that's how a lot of these home improvement contractors run into chargebacks. So when I tell them that, I can just see their eyes like, oh,
yeah. You're
right?
establishing your expertise and showing them that you're the person that's going to add value.
Absolutely. And so I'll tell them, I was like, listen, you know, on the agreement that they sign, we'll have a separate line item that they'll have to initial that says, you know, by you providing payment information to us through a credit card or a debit card, you are authorizing us to store that information, you know, in accordance with PCI compliance standards, and authorizing us to charge that card the final balance within 24 hours of the project being completed if you do not provide alternate payment, right? They are initialing that. And so with that, we are preventing a lot of those chargebacks from even happening, because even if you finish the project and even if they owe you that final balance, you're going to lose that chargeback because you didn't have authorization to pull it, right? So when I lead with that, I've already got their interest, knowing that I'm an expert.
I don't want to cut you off there, but let's zoom out for 1 second, because I think this is interesting, because this is actually really applicable to a lot of different areas of different things people would sell. So if I could generalize this for a second and see if you agree, Jeron, I think what you're saying from a general perspective is understand the business that you're trying to sell. And if you know of something right off the bat that is going to establish your expertise and that maybe is a little bit of a wow moment for them to go, oh, wow, wait a minute, that's insightful. We didn't realize that. You're bringing something to the table. That's a great way to start that transition from kind of the general curiosity to say, okay, let's start talking about value. It's like, boom, here's kind of this bomb I can drop on you in a way of saying like, okay, wait a minute, this person knows a lot of things about payment processing that I don't know. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. Because what I'm doing is I'm establishing that, hey, I'm an expert in my field, but that I also understand your field,
Their world,
and
yep.
how my expertise in my field relates to help you in your field, right? I talk a lot about improved cash flow and minimizing bad debt. A lot of home improvement contractors have a ton of bad debt that they are having difficulty collecting. And collections is the nasty part of that business, because again, if you don't have a process in place to capture that payment information and get authorization for that final balance, you're going to find yourself in a situation where you've done the job, but for whatever reason, you're not getting paid. And then that becomes a nightmare, because oftentimes the bigger companies will push that onto the project managers. Hey, these 4 jobs that we did last month still haven't paid us yet. You need to call them. You need to go by their house. You need to do all that. They didn't get into this to be debt collectors, right? And a lot of times if you ask that question, do you have any bad debt from last year? Most of them say yes. And then when you ask them how much, if you've established that relationship, a lot of them will tell you. Some of them are embarrassed, but you get them thinking about how what you have to offer can minimize that from occurring in the future.
Like the key to pulling that off, again, I think is knowledge. It's funny what you were saying that. I remember an example where I was selling to this hair and nail salon, and I was really, really new, and I had just learned about check conversion and guarantee, which I thought would just be great to talk about to this hair and nail salon. So I'm discussing this because I saw somebody writing a check, and this was a long time ago. But I walked in and, and somebody's writing a check, and I'm like, oh man, you guys still take those checks to the bank? What if this check conversion and guarantee? And I was like, the best thing about it is you never have to worry about a bad check because they take care of this. And the guy's like, our checks are like $50, $30. Like they don't care about that at all. So, right. And so I think it's really important. I think the idea is you have to have that that kind of knowledge base to present you as an expert. So I really like that. Any other tips from zooming out at a broad level, Jeron, as far as, okay, you've established you're an expert, what you're talking about, pinpoint a couple of things that you can talk about that maybe you're going to pique their interest and establish that expertise. Then any further tips you have of kind of generally, how do you move that towards the close? Are you kind of doing anything particular to maybe establish value with them, or any other tips you have about kind of moving forward from that place of expertise?
Yeah, so once we have established that, that's when I go into the statement analysis, right? And my goal is not necessarily to end up on a, I'm going to save you this much. But part of my pitch and my presentation is doing a side-by-side comparison just of the amount of information and data that comes through on the statements, right? Because if they have an effective rate that's 3.5% and they've got the basic statement that only shows, how much volume they ran through and what their fees are, and they've got a page and a half statement, and then I show a contractor statement on our end that is Interchange Plus that shows all of the classifications. As I'm walking them through this, I'm letting them know that, listen, I understand that people want simplicity, and this is simple. You can look at it and say, I charge this much, I paid this much, this is what my effective rate is. But with the lack of disclosure, this is all of the data that you're not getting, right? And by you not getting it, it means you can't optimize it. It means if they change something on the back end, you're not going to see it. And so I kind of walk through how transparent we are with that. And I'll tell them, most companies don't like Interchange Plus because it makes it easy for someone to come right behind you and then just undercut you, right? But for you as the merchant, you can't see anything on this basic statement. So when they change something, you don't know about it. And I always use this line, if they're not disclosing it, there's probably a reason why. And once I hit that, and then I talk about, how we, doing Interchange Plus, we give a guarantee in writing that our margin over interchange will never increase. So I'm giving them that security of knowing, hey, 50 basis points and 10 cents, it's never going to increase. And then people say, well, how do you deal with inflation and things like that? And I'm like, your cost on a roof is $15,000 right now, right?
Right.
Last year, it was $9,000. Your ticket went up. I'm still making 50 basis points on that larger ticket. So I don't have to increase my margins on you because you've increased your price. But right. Yep. And so when you explain that, it's like, oh. So again, there's the value in the transparency and what you're disclosing and your expertise without having to focus on, we're going to save you this much. Because a lot of times I'll tell them, it's going to be in this neighborhood. I said, but they don't disclose any information. So I'm going into this completely blind.
Yeah.
Right. And then when you explain that to them and they're able to see it, then the wheels start turning in their head like, oh, okay. And then after we have a full billing statement, a billing cycle's worth of data, then we can do an actual review and see what the cards were that you actually accepted, right? Because here's the interchange table, here's what we were showing, and just kind of go that route and transition that into statements, analysis, close.
Love it. Love it. So here's what I want to do. We got 5 minutes left. And so if some of our panelists, if you guys need to hop off or something, that's fine. What I want to do is, rather than take questions right now, because we just wouldn't have time to get to hardly any of them, I was just thinking while you guys were all talking, and I haven't shared on these panel discussions too much because I wanted this to be about you guys and your tips, because you're a lot closer to the action than I am now. But in this area, I did have just a thought I wanted to share if I could. So, I was thinking, like, in the last week, the deals that I close now are very different, right, than just selling merchant services. In the last week, I closed one deal that's going to be $240,000 for the year in fees. They're paying $20,000 a month. I closed another one that's $120,000, so it's $10,000 a month. And that's a normal month for me. We increased our recurring revenue by $30,000. My cost on that revenue is going to be probably $7,000 in payroll for my team to do some various things. And when I was coming to the end of selling payment processing full time, I was really going after like mega accounts. And one of the things that I've learned along the way about the presentation stage is that you've got to learn how to zoom out. And the question is, how much value are you going to add to the business owner's bottom line? And then what are they going to have to do to get that value? And so I like to go overboard on the positive and overboard on the negative. And let me explain what I mean by that. Now, right now, the kind of stuff I do is actually pretty simple like that. Like as an example, the 20,000 a month deal, I can't give too many details, but like basically I gave a proposal after talking to the CEO of this huge company and said, what I'm about to offer you, I outlined it and said, what kind of value, if I can accomplish these objectives. So I'm like, here's the objectives that I see where I can add value. If I can accomplish these objectives, what kind of value is this going to add? And we had a whole conversation about that. And the resulting answer was probably going to increase his bottom line profit by something like $500,000 every quarter moving forward. So when I said I want $250,000, it's kind of like, you'd really be stupid to not do that. And in the same way, on a smaller scale, when I'm selling payment processing, the negative for him was obvious. You got to pay me $250,000, like, check please, like that's huge negative, right? And so I'm like, I don't sugarcoat that at all. I'm like, this is what it costs. Like, this is it, right? But we first talk about the value. In the same way, when you're selling payment processing, and I was selling larger deals, I remember I sold a 40 location restaurant. They each needed 3 POS stations. And this was before the days of the free POS, right? And so, you can run the math on that. That was a pretty big transaction. Well, I had to break down a bunch of stuff in a proposal. It was like efficiency of employees. I can't just say, I'm going to make your employees more efficient. What does that mean? Well, right, you have this many employees. What's your average hourly amount? What percentage of their time are they spending doing these ridiculous tasks that should be automated? And if I can pull this off and automate this, what kind of value would that add to the bottom line, right? And then the payment processing, I'm going to save you X amount. And so breaking this down and thinking about what is the impact going to be on the business owner, getting them to quantify and to agree on value. That's the key. Like, you have to both agree on value, then you have to agree on measures of success before you get into anything else, right? So you say, like, our objective is X. And you say, okay, cool, this is our objective. How valuable is X if we accomplish that? And we all agree, okay, it's valuable because part of it might be intangible. It's going to give you more time with your family. You know what I mean? Your business is going to run better, less stress. Your better marriage. Like whatever, right? Because it's just like so stressful for these business owners sometimes. And so you talk about the value, and you agree on that. Then you say, okay, let me ask you a question. I know we haven't known each other that long, and so when I talk about I'm going to give you this value over the next 12 months, what would be the measures of success for you? How are you going to know 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 12 months from now that the relationship that you're starting with me today is actually giving you the deliverables, the objectives that we're describing? What does that mean to you? And you may have zero idea of what it really means to them. You'd be really surprised a lot of times. Their measures of success may be, well, I'm going to get a lot less customer complaints. And you're like, oh, what do you mean? And it's like, well, like you mentioned, I think it was Jeremy talking about the sign, or somebody was talking about the sign, or no, it was Adam saying the sign in the business was not good, right? Like, what is your measure of success? Well, less customer complaints, right? Or I'm going to see a 10% decrease in the cost of card acceptance, and 10 basis point difference in my effective rate cost, or whatever, right? Like, but you got to like talk through and evaluate and say, what does success look like? So you agree on the objective, you agree on the measures of that objective. Then you go in and say, okay, I'm going to tell you straight up what's going to have to happen in order for you to get this, right? So we've established the value. We know what the measures of success are. Here's what this looks like. You're going to have to, get this, do this. You're going to have to, whatever, right? And I try to make it sound a little worse than it is, to be honest, because I don't want to make it sound too good to be true. I don't want it to be like, hey, I'm going to give you millions of dollars. Today I don't go and say like, I'm going to give you millions of dollars in value, and it's going to cost you, if I went to this company, the one I just sold for $250,000, and said I'd do it for 50,000, they kind of like, what do you mean? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know about that. Like, why are you charging so little? You know what I mean? Like, why are you undercutting yourself? And so I want to go in there and say like, look, I'm going to do this for you. And I am going to deliver this objective, myself and my team. Like, we're going to do this for you, but it's going to be hard. Right. And there's going to be a lot of work involved. And so I tell people all the time, I say, look, I'm only looking for relationships. I just had a guy, 3 days ago, everybody on this would know who it was if I said the name of the guy. Owns a huge company. Everybody knows. This guy, we were on the phone, we were on a Zoom for 30 minutes, and he was trying to talk me into doing something with him. And I turned him down over and over and over again because I kept saying, I said, how is that going to add $2 million to your bottom line? I don't see it. And he's like, well, no, I wouldn't add that much value. I said, then I don't want to work with you because it's not worth, like, I want to charge you $250,000. Like, I have to add millions of dollars. Otherwise, what's the point? Right. And I'm like, let's talk about something else. And we're good friends. We had this great conversation, and we spent 30 minutes trying to figure out how I could add a ton to his business. And at the end, I said, I can't add that much value to you right now, man. Like, you're doing great. Congrats on your success, but I'm going to put my time where it's going to be worth a lot to somebody. And so having that attitude with the business owner and saying, like, I only work with people where I can add a lot of value because, frankly, I want to make a lot of money too. And let me explain, how I can add value to you, and let's talk about it, and let's see if we agree on value and if we agree on these objectives. And then if and only if we agree on these things, let me tell you what it's going to cost you and what you're going to have to do to get it. So again, not exactly as quite as practical or applicative to selling payment processing per se, but it's just something that I found that's very, very helpful, especially as you start going after. If you want to make a lot of money in this business, in any business, what you have to do is you got to say, wait a minute, what is the value to the business owner, right? And you have, I mean, this is why I like selling on price. I really do a lot of times. I mean, because sometimes you go into a business and they're getting ripped off, and it's like, it's so easy to quantify and say, look, do you think you're going to be with me at least 3 years? Awesome. I'm going to save you $176,000. So let's go ahead and get something done here. I mean, obviously this is a no-brainer. Do you have any questions? Like, that's because it's so easy, and I don't mind that, right? Then I'm going to come back behind that with technology, but you're going to go back in. And I used to do consulting. I would have clients where, and I'll end this in 1 minute, but I'll tell you one more story. I had a client one time where I sold them on price, and it was a uniform. They sold uniforms for nurses and people like that. They had 7 or 8 locations. And after I sold them, I came back in and I pitched them on point of sale. But here's the thing I did. I offered the point of sale system for free within this package. I ended up charging them a one-time fee of $25,000 in order to implement a point of sale infrastructure for their business. Now, in retrospect, I underpriced myself by a mile, but the idea there is I didn't go in, and you don't have to itemize everything. You don't have to go in and say, this printer is going to cost you this much. No, you can go in and say, look, what if I could deliver you a point of sale system? I could train your team, and I could get everybody on board, everything set up, locked and loaded in 3 months. How would you feel about that? Is that a valuable outcome for you? It's like, oh my word, that would be unbelievable. Great. Let me type up a proposal of what that would look like. Then you go back and say, okay, if I implement this, it's going to make you an extra what, right? Like Adam talked about growing your business, right? It's going to grow your business and all these efficiencies. And then you say, here's what I'm going to do for you. Don't worry about the specifics. I'll cover all the costs and we'll make sure that's all included. But what I would do for you is over 3 months for $50,000, we can get this taken care of. Do you want to do maybe half up front? We can do half at the end, whatever works best for you. And as long as they agree that this is going to be worth $150,000 a year to them, then $50,000 is nothing. They'd be like so stupid not to do that. They'll go borrow money to do it. And so anyway, that's all I got to say about that. But our panel, you guys are all fantastic. I've just so much enjoyed these conversations. I've learned a lot from them as well. We're going to do one last one, so make sure you join us next Friday, 4:15. Not sure who all of our panels will be yet, but some of us will be here, and we'll be talking about closing the sale, bringing all this to a conclusion. So Tam, Jeremy, Jeron, and Adam, thank you all so much for your expertise. Thank you everybody for attending. We'll see you next week.